Okay. So the first brain chemical we're going to look at, be with a minute, is acetylcholine. Each brain chemical, the palm ones, we'll briefly look, and you've got the notes there. Most of you have done courses on neurotransmitters before. Each of them can be up or down. What we have to remember is that the yang points on the face represent the deficiencies of the brain chemicals, and the excesses, which show on the high levels, show on the trunk, are the yin meridians. Okay, so the yin ones are high, the yang ones are low. Okay. So acetylcholine we make from choline, and we need an acetyl group to do that, and we use acetyl-CoA from the Krebs cycle there. And this is the job of thiamine, but the active coenzyme is called thiamine triphosphate, which is a manganese-dependent enzyme, to put the acetyl group on the choline to make acetylcholine. So key nutrients would be choline, B5 for the acetyl group, B1 for the thiamine, and maybe alpha lipoic acid and manganese. To break acetylcholine down, we need an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase, which is B2 and B3, manganese and zinc dependent as cofactors. But primarily here we've got the B2, B3. Now B2 and B3 are vasodilators. Okay, so this is really important to remember. So B2 and B3, if you want to have a good time and a good flush, you know, do have 4 or 5 squirts of our niacin. Okay. Don't buy NADH, it doesn't create the flush. If you want somebody to have niacin for high-ish amounts, use NADH, okay, as the coenzyme. But if you want to have just basic niacin, 1 squirt, maybe 2, but once you get above what their person needs, if they take too much, they'll get a flush. And when we were teaching, do you remember that chap in Dublin the other week? He wanted to have a flush. But he bought a bottle of NADH and he was upset because he didn't get a flush. So he'll have a flush, he's got a bottle of niacin now. And you know, if you want to experience it, because a lot of people feel really fantastic afterwards. You burn like bilio when you're having the flush because it throbs and things, but afterwards it cleans all your brain out and it's opened up all your capillaries and things, and then things flow through. Now, with people with certain heart problems will respond much better to B2, B3 than they will B1. Okay, now in the update seminar, we've got quite a few good things coming up for you. And one of those will be cardiac lesions, of when you would use B2, B3, as opposed to B1. So B1 works more in the nervous system, so it's very important for the brain, but B2, B3 work primarily in the vascular system to open up. So if you want to get more blood into the heart, which is very important, use B2 and B3, not B1. So there may be times where the B complex defeats the object, because you've got B1 is a vasoconstrictor, so you don't want necessarily the B complex in a cardiac case, you need very specific. So we'll be looking at whether you use B1 or the other Bs. Okay, so to break acetylcholine down, we need B2, B3, and again magnesium and manganese and zinc. So acetylcholine is used all over the body because it runs up our neuromuscular junctions and our parasympathetic nerve supply. So you can see here, very important little area called the amygdala there, which we talked about this morning, in the subconscious mind. So a lot of parasympathetic, acetylcholine receptors there. So the emotion associated here with David Hawkins's work of tying those levels of consciousness, or these negative unconscious emotions, associated with low levels of acetylcholine, is associated always with the gallbladder meridian. So the gallbladder is the representation of low acetylcholine, and the emotion involved with this is guilt and blame. And this guilt and blame is used to manipulate and punish people and yourself. Okay? Self-punishment would come into there because you feel guilty about something, therefore you punish yourself. And we all do that. We make ourselves martyrs, don't we? Remorse, self-recrimination, masochism, because we're punishing ourselves there, victimhood, accident proneness, suicide behavior, preoccupation with sin. You know, everything is a sin in life. That's sure sign of guilt and blame, isn't it? unforgiving emotional attitudes, self-flagellation, and cruelty is projecting it onto other people or animals. So these are people who are harbouring guilt and blame. It does not mean everybody who shows positive on the gallbladder is this person, okay? But these are the characteristics. If there's an emotional component, guilt and blame is a bad thing because it's self-destruct. It's self-destruction mechanism, so that's not good. Now, high acetylcholine, on the other hand, makes the neuromuscular junctions rigid because acetylcholine runs the neuromuscular. So this person is rigid in their thinking. And there's times when you want rigidity in thinking, and the prime time with that is troops in the army. You want them to be rigid and to do exactly as they're told. Okay? No army in the world could march without pride. Okay? It wouldn't get very far. Okay? You'd soon get massacred if you hadn't got the pride in what you were doing. So pride feels good, but only in contrast that you're better than other people or the other emotions. It is defensive. So really the person with pride is vulnerable. And after pride comes a fall. So very often when people get to this level or show this level, which is associated with the liver meridian and high acetylcholine, they tumble right down to the bottom of the chart, which is shame and humiliation, with the bladder meridian and low serotonin. So these people are hiding something. They hide it by thinking that they're better than you, or you're better than somebody else. Depends on which one. So it's an inflated ego, and it's very vulnerable to attack. So pride is not just that I'm better than you, but very much it can be hurt pride. And hurt pride may be even more important than pride that I'm better than you. So we all feel hurt sometimes. And that's your pride, isn't it, when you feel hurt? And some people are like that all the time. So remember that this is going to be associated with the liver and high levels of acetylcholine. Divisive, fractionalism, pride takes people to war. Arrogance is a good word. Arrogance, denial, pride before the judgmental is another good word for it. People who are always criticizing, thinking they're better than somebody else. And we all do this all the time, during the day and things. When you hear about a story and you think it's silly idiot or whatever, you're making the judgment already. And we're all. So think of it, and think also of the other side of it, of hurt pride. So this will be a person who shows up positive on the liver with an emotional problem. So guilt and blame, pride and scorn. So the other parts of this are involved with the more physiological deficiencies and excesses. But on the deficiency side here, we can see that we get confusion because we're not getting our memory to work properly, because our memory is partly instigated through the brain by acetylcholine. We may get delirium, and certainly low levels of acetylcholine occur with Alzheimer's disease. Pride and scorn, you can get aggressive behaviour. So this is a behaviour sort of problem. Panic attacks, particularly what they call fear paralysis as a retained primitive reflex. But I would say most panic attacks, in my opinion, are hypoxia. So people who get panic attacks is because they get panic attacks in the brain because the brain thinks it's dying. So the panic attack hits the respiratory centre in the very low levels in the medulla, really primitive brain areas, and it switches immediately in a panic attack to make you gasp for breath. So these people, they get hyperventilation and so on. But that's simply responding to oxygenation. Right. So those are the 2 points that if they come up, we'll test Catherine in a minute and see what comes up with it once we've done these. So we've got gallbladder on the lateral part of the orbit of the eye, and we've got liver and liver 14. If you drop a line from the nipple to the rib cage, it's usually about halfway there in the 6th interspace. Adrenaline, or epinephrine as the Americans call it, is a little bit more complex. It's made from tyrosine, and we make L-dopa first of all, and then dopamine. And dopamine then goes on to be hydroxylase to make noradrenaline. So this particular pathway, the first pathway here, uses tyrosine to make L-dopa, needs an enzyme called tetrahydrobiopterin, which is a type of folic acid, which we make up. Now, if you want to activate folic acid, from folic acid into tetrahydrofolate and all the other forms of folates, all you need is folic acid and zinc. I haven't yet found anybody who actually needs folinic acid, methyl or methylene tetrahydrofolate, all they need is zinc and folate together, but you have to test them together. Okay? So you put folic on and they don't strengthen, put zinc on, they don't, but put the two on together. In other words, the zinc will be the cofactor to make the enzyme work to get the folic acid hydrated, if you know, tetrahydro. But there may come a person who has a true SNP and requires folinic acid, but I haven't come across them yet. So we do a mix of folic acid and zinc together, okay? So that's available, and you know, whenever you need an active form of folic, they don't strengthen the folic, use the folic and zinc mix, it's called. Okay? Now this is an interesting tyrosine hydroxylase enzyme, because this is the enzyme that is enhanced by vitamin D. So vitamin D here acts as a allosteric effector, it's called. In other words, it's a boost to the enzyme. The enzyme is the tetrahydrobiopterin dependent, but it's enhanced. And this is really the background of the whole thing, because we'll see that tyrosine to L-DOPA goes on to make dopamine before noradrenaline. So we're getting an upper, okay? And that's why the sunshine makes us feel better, isn't it? You know, look how happy everybody was that they could just go outside there for a few minutes at lunchtime, okay? As opposed to if it was dark and rainy or wintertime, you wouldn't have seen that. Just look at what everybody's wearing. You know, there's really not many people in black. You've got a little bit of black there, and you've got a bit of black there. Oh, you've got a bit of black as well. Okay. So black is, you know, you'd expect people to wear black more in the wintertime because it reflects their mood much more. So people wear colours and things, and they get out and they're happier, aren't they, altogether? So that's the D factor, the D kicking in and boosting, and it boosts the production of dopamine, noradrenaline because of this enzyme, and also serotonin. Same enzyme there converts tyrosine, or converts tryptophan there, into 5-hydroxytryptophan. So vitamin D has a wonderful tonic effect on the hormones and things, the brain chemicals which modulate us and our mood. So remember that, vitamin D. Okay. Now, we need some P5P here, or B6, zinc and magnesium to here, and we need some vitamin C here and copper. So our nutrients would be getting the oxygen in here, so the folates, B6, the main thing. B6 is known as the antidepressive vitamin, isn't it? Because practically all these brain chemicals need B6, but they also need zinc and magnesium as cofactors to get these enzymes to work. So if you only had three things, B6, zinc and magnesium, you probably would never get depressed. Okay, most of the endogenous depression is a nutritional deficiency of one or all of those. Now, we get rid of noradrenaline when we've made it by oxidizing it with monoamine oxidase, and then we methylate it with methyltransferase enzyme, and then we conjugate it to pass it out in the urine. So monoamine oxidase is an enzyme which is B2 dependent. Okay? Remember riboflavin, in other words, B2 dependent, and copper. And this enzyme, monoamine oxidase, very important enzyme, converts it then to the oxidized form of noradrenaline, which is then methylated by S-adenosylmethionine, which is magnesium dependent, and then we can weed it out. We conjugate it then with either glutathione, which we looked a little bit briefly this morning, sulfur, glucuronidation, or acetylation. So those are the four things that we can bond it to pass it out in the urine there. So key nutrients, copper and B2 for monoamine oxidase, SAM for the methylation, sulfur, vitamin C, B5. So we need B6 here to get the formation of cysteine to produce glutathione through the homocysteine pathway. We need sulfur for sulfation. You could use here sulfur or MSM we use quite often there. You know, that's quite a good substance. Vitamin C stimulates glucuronidation, and B5, of course, is the acetyl donor. Acetyl-CoA is made of B5. Natural sources of these conjugating substances I put in there for you, so you can see a lot of herbs and just basic sort of foods. Remember, with nuts and things, I've never seen cashew nuts in their shells. If you've ever been to the tropics. What? No. No, you don't, do you? That's the one nut you've got to be careful of, because I would guess they're all rancid. lovely that they are, but if you've ever been to the tropics, they're a funny nut, they're a funny shell. It's like a fruit with a funny little tail. You see it in the tropical islands where they grow them in the Indian Ocean. And I think the fruit that they come in is highly poisonous, which is one of the reasons why the nut is so expensive. Cashews. But most of these are common things which we'd have in our diet a lot. Here we've got sulphur, parsnips, horseradish. I think we might add the asparagus that you're talking about there in there as well. Good source at the moment. Glutathione, rosemary, garlic, spinach, onions, watercress. Watercress, you see watercress comes up quite a lot. It's a very good detoxifier, watercress. Noradrenaline works in many of the brain components and of course in the sympathetic nervous system. When we get low noradrenaline, we don't have any get up and go. And some people say that's exactly how I feel. I've lost my get up and go. So in other words, they've lost their spurt in life. They get depression, but the depression is a loss of get up and go. It's different from the other ones. Apathy or sloth, this just really can't be bothered to do anything. They can get memory impairment, dementia. Now on the excess, of course, when you have very high noradrenaline, you're going through a very nervous, high sympathetic stress reaction. And that's how. So aggression, behavior, impulsive behavior, and violence, irritability. These are people who nothing is right for them. And you know that they're firing on all cylinders. Okay, so they're going to be high noradrenaline. So the 2 points are going to be small intestine 19 for the deficiency. That's the yang point of small intestine. And the heart, which is right at the top of the axilla, on the posterior wall of the pec muscles there, is going to be the high noradrenaline. So heart when you're thumping away there. Okay. Just on the topic of thumping hearts, useful information. If someone's got a thumping heart, okay, in other words, put tachycardia going there, look at potassium. Potassium is what slows the heart down. Okay. A fast heart is either going to be a fast thyroid, hypothyroid condition, or it's going to be a potassium deficiency.
What is a slow heart due to?
Slow heart needs phosphorus. Slow heart needs more sympathetic action. Speed a heart up, you need phosphorus. It's a deficiency of phosphorus.
Where do you get phosphorus? You can't get it.
You could use a phosphate, something phosphate, some magnesium phosphate, so some phosphate, any phosphate, potassium phosphate and so on. Someone was asking the other week about tissue salts. I think we've reintroduced the liquid ones, the liquid tissue salts. Was it you? No. Did you put your hand up? Or were you just having a stretch, were you? It was funny in Dublin because I couldn't get used to the fact when they wanted to ask a question, they went, yes. There was one lovely girl. And I was standing here and she said, she asked me a question and I looked around and she said, I'm down here. What, do you remember who it was? She's a little girl, obviously. And she said, she was about the third down on the left there. There were three ladies and this was, no, it wasn't you. Was it you? Yeah. It was probably you who asked the question there. You said, I'm down here. That was lovely. Absolutely fabulous. So heart, speed the heart up, you need phosphates, and to slow it down, you need potassium. Okay. Somebody was asking, perhaps it was you, somebody was asking about redoing the tissue salts. You wanted them, didn't you? But quite a number of other people have asked for them. So I think we will. They removed them due to EU regulations as far as being food supplements. So as long as they're not food supplements, then they can be reused. It's just a matter of technicality, isn't it?
What about atrial fibrillation?
Atrial fibrillation we get on to when we do the update. That atrial fibrillation is B4. It's vitamin B4. Now, you've never heard of vitamin B4, have you? No.
Yeah, adenosine.
Adenine, yes.
Oh, adenine.
Yes. So we'll look at that. We'll look at the plant natural sources of B4. So all arrhythmias, misfiring of the neurological beats, will be B4. Okay, noradrenaline. So 2 points, heart and small intestine. Okay. Dopamine. Okay, so this is the upper, right? Again, enhanced by vitamin D. So we already covered the same pathway here. but we go as far as dopamine instead of going down into making noradrenaline. So again, B6, zinc, magnesium, all very important here, and the folates for the first part. Breaking dopamine down is exactly the same as noradrenaline. Needs monoamine oxidase, methyltransferase, and conjugation. So monoamine oxidase, B2, copper, magnesium for SAM, sulfation, glutathione, glucuronidation, acetylation. So exactly the same effects. So dopamine is at the amygdala. Okay, see how big the part here now with the amygdala. So the amygdala is the bit which is like the rheostat or the dimmer switch for the subconscious emotions. So we know that subconscious or limbic system is all over the brain apart from the frontal orbital cortex, but the center of it, the rheostat there, is the amygdala, and active in fear and negative emotions. So they try and calm the amygdala down. This is in post-traumatic stress, conditions. But of course, you can calm that dopamine when you're overactive, quite simply, can't you? Because you were reminding me, I think, how you do it. You just tap the conception vessel, which lowers it. Or rather, sorry, you tap the top one because that's the over. So you're touching governor vessel 27. If you want to increase dopamine, you tap conception vessel 24. So when you want to decrease it, if you're having a lot of nightmares and things, that's right, because we were talking about nightmares. Nightmares are too much dopamine. Okay. So low dopamine is a lack of joy in life, really. It's associated with David Hawkins' grief and regret symptoms. If only I had done it that way, if I had my time again, people. They see sadness everywhere, loss and despondency, remorse about the past. So this may not be just grief from the loss of somebody, but it could be the loss of something. So this is the one of the hoarder. And I'm a hoarder. I can't let go of things very easily. And if you can't let go of things, this is grief and regret. So conception vessel comes up a lot. We talked about that this morning with the cancers. And so often the cancer comes 1 or 2 years after the grief, if you like, of a divorce or a bereavement. And they've lost their dopamine, they've lost everything in life, they don't feel loved anymore, and you can see why things start to happen. So it's the level of the habitual loser who accepts failure as part of their normal lifestyle, often can result in loss of jobs, friends, family, and opportunities. So low dopamine. High dopamine gives you the thrill. As we talked with the gambler doesn't actually have to win or lose. The thrill is the participating in it. And so the real surge of dopamine is what you're after. And when you get that surge of dopamine, you feel great. And what you want to do is have another surge and another one. But it takes you more to stimulate it to get to the next one. So you have to lose more money next time. Okay, so it's the gambling one. So it motivates vast areas of human activity, especially in the advertising world. You have a desire for money, prestige, power, desire for attention, constant demands, sexual approval. It's the level ultimately of addiction, isn't it? Which is, we're all addicted to something, I think, in the end. Craving may be even more important than life itself in the drug addict and the severe gambler. Okay, so grief and regret, and craving and desire, the excess. So deficiency, we see irrational behavior, poor concentration. Indecision. Now, indecision is really thought to be because the corpus callosum, which links the left and the right hemispheres and talks the left and the right, are actually made of 7 different neuronal synapses. So information goes from the left to the right rather slowly. That's why nature's given you lots of synapses now, to slow it down so you don't just flick across like that. And every single one of those is dopaminergic, so it knows it uses dopamine. So people who are low in dopamine can't make decisions because they can't swing to the left or the right so easily. So making a decision is they keep seeing things from 2 sides. So they're not good at decision making. They have a world without pleasure. In other words, there's no joy, there's no real fun in life because they're not getting the surges anymore. On the excess, they get anxiety, aggression, confusion, nightmares, as we talked about there, and maybe in severe cases, psychosis and even schizophrenia. So 2 points easy there. Low level is conception vessel 24. This is on the tissue between the lip and the skin. Okay. and governor vessel 27 is between the lip tissue and the upper, on the upper side. Okay, student points. Serotonin. Many areas in the brain, again the amygdala, the subconscious emotions, are serotonergic. Serotonin is made from tryptophan. Remember, tryptophan is one of those very important amino acids that gets glycosylated with the cooking. So you go back tomorrow, don't put honey on your chicken tomorrow. Remember, anything that you cook with sugar and protein will get glycosylated, okay? Okay, so don't cook with starch. Okay. You could add it afterwards, yes, but you mustn't cook. It's the browning effect when you cook, like
barbecued food.
yeah, rice pudding or anything where you're getting milk and you're heating it and you go brown. It's the Maillard reaction, isn't it? It's the correct scientific Maillard reaction. Okay. So we make then tryptophan there stimulated by vitamin D and again the folates, and then we convert 5-hydroxytryptophan there into serotonin with the same pathway, decarboxylation, which needs B6, zinc and magnesium. So some people like to take 5-hydroxytryptophan, 5-HTP it's called for short, to jumpstart this, and it seems to work very well with a lot of people who suffer from depression with their low serotonin, and they strengthen to 5-hydroxytryptophan. My personal feeling is that if you strengthen to 5-hydroxytryptophan, you need to test them with tryptophan, and if they weaken, or rather, yes, if they weaken to tryptophan, you've got a problem with this enzyme. If they strengthen the tryptophan, it means you're deficient. Okay, anybody who needs tryptophan, look at them when they're cooking with the wrong types, cooking starch together. But if they weaken to tryptophan, it means they've got a relatively high amount of tryptophan, and then they strengthen to 5-hydroxy, it means they need this, so the problem is in this enzyme. So think of the folates and things. If they strengthen to serotonin and weaken to 5-hydroxytryptophan, then the problem's here. So think B6, magnesium and zinc. To metabolize or get rid of serotonin, same enzymes, exactly the same as dopamine and noradrenaline, monoamine oxidase, methylation, conjugation. So here we see monoamine oxidase, methyltransferase, and conjugation. Right, the three most commonly studied neurotransmitters are dopamine, serotonin, and noradrenaline. Dopamine is related to experience and expectations of pleasure, reward learning processes. In other words, when you do something good, you're rewarded with dopamine and gain a pleasurable, happy feeling. This teaches your brain to want to do it again and again. Serotonin is a transmitter associated with memory and learning. Researchers believe it plays a part in regeneration of brain cells, which have been linked to easing depression. An imbalance in serotonin levels results in an increase in anger, anxiety, depression and panic. Noradrenaline helps modulate brain by controlling stress and anxiety. So most medications, the original tricyclic drugs, worked on all three of these to inhibit their breakdown. Okay, so this was why these three brain chemicals are the main balance, to keep a balance between these three, is the principal approach with antidepressants. So you can see that they all interact, so the answer was to give a blockbuster formula which would deal with all that. So that's one sort of approach. Or to inhibit the monoamine oxidase to stop breaking those brain chemicals down. So they were called monoamine oxidase inhibiting drugs. Most of those have gone off the market now in favour of the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So they're looking now how to block the breakdown of specifically serotonin. But you'll see that the approach is a pharmaceutical one. It's to block. And this is the problem. Whereas how we would approach it is we would say, well, let's help the person to make more serotonin. Let's look at the pathway, 5-HTP, tryptophan and so on, and look at how we could open this up to help this person to make their serotonin naturally, rather than inhibiting or poisoning an enzyme to stop it from going back and recycling. So fundamentally, a drug is different from obviously a nutrition. A nutrition is something you should get normally from your food, and you may need to supplement a little bit extra in. A drug is a poison. Okay? Make no bones, that is a definition. It's something which can have a beneficial effect, but in high doses will kill you. Okay? That's why you talk in milligrams with drugs. Okay? They're not wonderful medicines, that the general public think, oh, there's a drug for everything, there's a medication which will cure me. They don't cure you of anything. Okay? They treat the symptoms, okay? And they are all poisons. That's why they're listed. That's why only doctors can prescribe them, because it's, you know, you don't want people buying poisons, really, do you? So we've got to think we're not working, you know, with poisons. We're working to try and help the person to build up their own health and to create the balance with it. Okay. Now there is a time when you need a poison, okay, in small doses. You know, there may be a time when it could be life-threatening, or you want to have a quick result. And you don't want to have that headache because you've got an important meeting or something, so you take something which will kill the pain or reduce the inflammation. You know? But that will never get to the answer if you end up taking that painkiller every day, which is the approach with a lot of people is, oh, I get headaches every day, so I take so many aspirin or paracetamol, whatever it is. In the end, their liver's going to say, hold on, we can't take it anymore. And then the person's surprised. You know, I've got a patient at the moment. She hurt her back, she fell back, she's nearly 88, she fell backwards and hurt her spine. And luckily it hasn't broken, but she's already had a broken back, so she knows not to slide. But she went on paracetamol, and within days her legs had got total edema in them. And she realised it was just paracetamol. But she didn't know, because unless you take the medication, you don't know you're going to have a side effect from it. She's a blue, and blue people are not very good with paracetamol. So have a look on the chart. It's on our website about the drugs associated with each cytochrome P450 pathway with their different deficiencies with the different constitutional colours. So it's a great pity, but you know, it's gone. She's changed medication and she's fine. But a week or so later, it's still puffier than what it should be. Sorry, do you? I think you were just doing an Irish. Okay. So it's a combination of those. So the neurotransmitters, serotonin, noradrenaline, and dopamine are the ones mainly involved with the endogenous emotionals, remember. We're looking at endogenous. So any activity in a garden, such as weeding, pruning, cultivating and harvesting, has been shown to increase the low levels of serotonin. That's nice. So just being outdoors in the garden has a wonderful therapeutic effect. So let's have a look at other ways that we can boost these brain chemicals, particularly serotonin. So avoid the fast track to happiness. Okay? The fast track to happiness is chocolate and carbohydrates, okay? Because this gets you out. So carbohydrates are a quick fix, but they do nothing to stimulate ongoing production of serotonin. Don't avoid carbohydrates entirely. Proteins contain tryptophan. Relying solely on protein can hamper serotonin production. So you actually need some carbohydrate to get tryptophan to work. Tryptophan works best when consumed in conjunction with a small amount of carbs, such as brown rice or nuts. Eat protein. Best sources of protein are turkey. Now, turkey is surprising. Turkey I would have thought was the same in many ways as chicken and be pretty disastrous. But in fact, turkey doesn't very rarely muscle test weak to people. Worth trying, even sliced turkey, and it's not going to be organic, and it'll be in slice, but we haven't found anybody who actually weakens to it yet. Plenty of people weaken to chicken, but not to turkey. So turkey might be a better, in other words, turkey may be able to detoxify all the garbage that they feed them better than chickens can. Very few people test well to chicken, and many people actually weaken to chicken, but very few people strengthen to it. But get an organic chicken and you'll probably strengthen to it. Be very good for your adrenals and things, but get a non-organic chicken and, you know, they get so depleted, don't they? So eat protein. We talked a bit about cheese. I would say cheese was excellent for people like this, but it should be from unpasteurized milk, okay? Don't have ordinary pasteurized. No, sorry, not cottage cheese. Cheese, yes. Yeah, you can get organic cottage cheese in supermarkets, but not unpasteurized. Yeah. I like organic cottage cheese. I think it's nice to put the oil in with, as we talked about in the cancer seminar, good way of taking your oil into cottage cheese, mix it up, and it's really quite tasty. Eggs, beans all contain generous portions of tryptophan. Remember, potatoes, rice, and rye and sesame seeds are some of the highest in amino acids, including tryptophan. Eat cold-pressed organic oils. Well, we know that anyway. Hormonal processed carbonated fatty acids. Try to work in natural light, broad spectrum lighting. Get outdoors, that's the main thing. Get that vitamin D in there to boost the enzymes for at least half an hour a day, regardless of the weather. Vitamin D enhances the production of 5-HTP. Exercise to feel good. Exercise is a natural stimulator of many important mood hormones, including serotonin and dopamine. Realize that 15 or 20 minutes of exercise every day will naturally release these feel-good hormones that are so vital to feeling happy and calm. Avoid the stimulant cycle. In other words, don't hit the caffeine too hard. Sugar, alcohol, caffeine, sugar, alcohol, caffeine, sugar, alcohol. You just repeat them in all day. Many of us get trapped in the stimulant cycle. These give you a temporary word. Sleep right. When you're feeling down, it's tempting to sleep. Quality sleep is far more important than quantity. Force yourself to get up early, but allow for a rejuvenating nap midday if you need it. A few years ago, I used to travel up to when I had the clinic in Thatcham, and I used to have to get up at 6 o'clock every morning during the week. And I thought, oh, this is going to be good, and couldn't wait for the weekend to come and that. But I was actually much better. It was, and I thought, I'm still awake at 11 o'clock, but if I got up at 7 or 8 o'clock, I would still, go to bed at 11 and such. And, I found that the same with the children. If you sleep in at the weekend, you sometimes feel worse, don't you? You feel heavier, and you think, I needed that sleep, but I actually don't feel so good.
Your sugar level drops,
I think your sugar level's dropped, your feces have been in your bowels too long, and you're starting to absorb stuff from your feces. It gets into your blood, and that makes you toxic and more tired. That's why large intestine is 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. So you should be up before 8 o'clock. If you think about it, that's probably why. Okay, so sleep right. Remember, the most important time of sleep is between 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. That's when melatonin is at its highest, and it needs to be done in total darkness. So total darkness at night time. Very interesting, is because melatonin is, of course, made from serotonin. And to get serotonin, you need daylight. Okay, daylight, vitamin D, etc. But to get melatonin, you need to switch the light off altogether. So to stimulate the pineal, you need total darkness or away from electromagnetic fields. So the darker you can get the room, and the further away from any electrical fields, the better. Okay. Supplements you might consider, obviously 5-HTP when it's required with people is a short-term fix. This comes from Grifolia seeds, which is an African plant. B6, I would always try B6 or pyridoxal 5-phosphate, the active coenzyme, zinc and magnesium, of course. Boost other hormones. Oxytocin, and we said about oxytocin, that was with you, wasn't it? No, you weren't oxytocin. No, the oxytocin is the blue one, isn't it? Okay. So oxytocin, to feel good, called the cuddle hormone. Okay. So oxytocin is released when we feel love, and this is why the blue person doesn't feel loved. They weaken to I am loved. So when they say I am loved, they weaken, and when you test them with that with oxytocin, they go strong. Okay. So they're deficient in oxytocin. So what they need is love. So cuddle them. So all blue people should be regularly cuddled. Okay, it helps them. Trust, comfort. It can be even more powerful than serotonin. If you need a lift, remember the power of simply spending time with your significant other or friends. Okay, so low serotonin, shame and humiliation. So you can tell this is the bladder meridian is low serotonin. The bladder meridian operates the perineal muscles in the foot, but it also operates the erector spinae muscle, doesn't it? So people who have low serotonin have low erector spinae tone. So you can see them coming, can't you? You can think, oh, this person's depressed. If I have a patient coming in like this, I know I'm in for trouble. You can tell when you go in the room. Well, we watch them go from the waiting room into the treatment room, and you think, oh no. It's no good asking them how they are, because they're going to tell you that they're not so good, for some reason. So shame and humiliation, body posture, the anatomy of emotions is very important. Wishing they were invisible. Maybe caused by sexual or physical abuse, produces neuroses. It can be destructive to emotional and physical health, low self-esteem, often compensated by perfectionism, rigidity, and becoming driven and intolerant. So this is the bladder meridian. Whereas fears and anxieties, fear of loss of love and security, obsessive jealousy, high stress, paranoia, limits growth, may be contagious. Fear and anxiety, suppose, requires a stronger personality to help overcome. Pull yourself together, and used as a tool for control. I was looking at whenever there's different stories in the newspapers, every newspaper carries a different story in the headlines, you know it's a non-news day. There's nothing that unites them. And yesterday was a particularly interesting one because there were different stories in all of them. And all of them were negative and all fearful. You know, the Express came right out that we were going to have lights out, electricity cuts within, with lights out every day. And then when you look closer, it was in 2 years' time, if something happened as well. So it was all, threats of bad news and things. And like we talked this morning, they'd be telling you about something bad and not something good. So it was the thing that impressed me when I first went to Australia in 1980 and, stayed out there for 3 or 4 months. All their news was good in those days. It's not so good now, but they're actually booming anyway. But in those days, it was about a new find of, something. New gold was found, new this mine was found. And that. It was all positive. And, the thing was, come on, Australia, come on. And people were much more positive with the approach. And then right in the middle at that particular time, page 3 at the bottom was a little line across there, Ronald Reagan shot, the attempt on his life. They couldn't care less about Ronald Reagan or the rest of the world. The rest of the world didn't exist. It was Australia. And the headlines that were out there was that Greg Chappell, the cricketer, had bowled an underarm in a test match against New Zealand. And there were questions asked in the Houses of Parliament about this, whether it was legal or not. This was headline news. So, every country has their goods and their bads. So if you look at newspapers, you'll find they all dwell on this. And this is associated with high levels of serotonin. And we know that serotonin has an amazing effect on high serotonin. It causes vasoconstriction of the arteries in the body, but it causes vasodilation in the mid-meningeal artery. So this promotes usually the migraine attack. So anything which limits monoamine oxidase, inhibits monoamine oxidase from working, the B2, the copper-dependent enzyme, will allow for high serotonin from a chemistry point of view. So people with high serotonin usually respond very well to vitamin B2, riboflavin 5-phosphate, etc.